Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at Etrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Etrailer trailer hitch receiver on a 2021 Ford Transit T350. Now this is how your hitch is going to look like when it's installed on your Transit, and it is an exposed cross tube, meaning you can see pretty much the entire majority of the hitch. But this is, with a van like this, it's definitely going to be used for a utility more than likely, and you're not really going for that aesthetic look. But going along with looks, this is a matte black powder coat finish, which matches really well to the plastics. It also holds up against chips and corrosion long term. Now this hitch in particular is 2-inch by 2-inch receiver tube opening, and that's going to be great when choosing ball mounts, bike racks, or cargo carriers because it's kind of the most common size and there's tons of accessories available. Now all of those accessories are going to stay in place with a 5/8 pin and clip. Now keep in mind this does not come with the hitch. A lot of times when you pick up accessories, they'll have the pin and clip included. If you're planning on leaving your accessories on the vehicle long term, you might want to look at a locking pin and clip. That way you can lock it in place and leave your accessories on the vehicle and not really have to worry about people coming by and taking them. If you plan on pulling a trailer with your hitch, you're going to be hooking up safety chains, and this is a plate style safety chain loop, which is nice and open. It allows you to put a standard S hook or even a larger clevis style pretty easily on the hitch. And speaking of towing, this has some pretty good capacity as far as your gross trailer weight rating, and that's going to be the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded onto it. And this is a pretty heavy duty van, but this one's coming in at 6,000 pounds, which is pretty solid. That's a pretty good capacity for this. You also have a tongue weight rating, which is the downward pressure on the inside of the receiver tube opening. That's going to be your bike racks and cargo carriers, things that are suspended. That's 900 pounds. So you can get a 4-bike rack loaded up with heavy bikes or a cargo carrier loaded up. I really don't think that you're going to go over that 900 pounds. So that's really nice to be able to utilize that real estate. Now it can be used with the weight distribution hitch, and you're going to get some pretty significant numbers with that. 8,000 pounds for the gross trailer weight rating, and your tongue weight's going to stay the same at 900, which is already pretty high. But so with that weight distribution hitch, it's really going to allow you to tow a decent amount of weight. But before doing that, you do want to check the vehicle's owner's manual to see what it's capable of towing, and then compare that with the hitch as well as any of the components that you'll be using. Take the lowest number, that way you stay safe. Now, as far as measurements go, you can see that the receiver tube opening sits a little bit further recessed than the rear bumper. And when it comes to choosing accessories like cargo carrier or bike racks that stow in a vertical position, you want to make sure that you're actually able to do that and not cause damage in the process. So from the center of our hitch pin hole to the furthest point on our bumper, we're looking at about 4 inches. Keep in mind when those are in that vertical position, you're more than likely not going to be able to open up your rear doors, but you can just fold those down, gain access, and then fold them back up. And as far as ground clearance goes, you're coming in at 13 inches, and that's going to be important not just for your accessories. I really don't worry too much that you're going to make contact with the ground, but just know that as you have bike racks and cargo carriers, they do extend the length of the vehicle. So as you go up an incline, they're going to want to tilt towards the ground. So something to keep in mind while doing that. But that measurement's mostly important for choosing a ball mount. That way you can determine the proper rise or drop necessary for your ball mount. So you can just measure the coupler of your trailer when it's on level ground and then take those numbers, compare that, and then you can get that ball mount nice and level. That way you're towing safely. Now, as far as the installation goes, this one's actually pretty easy to do. You're going to fish wire some hardware up in the frame. It's super easy. And then the remaining holes, you will have to use the tapping bolts that are included in the kit, or you'll need to pick up a tap. But it's really not too hard to do. If you've never created threads in a hole, it really just comes down to making sure you take your time, make sure it's nice and straight. Once you have that done, it pretty much just goes up. You bolt it up, torque it down, it's ready to go. And I'm going to walk you through all the steps to make sure we do it properly and make it a little bit easier for you. So let's take a look at that. To begin our installation, we're going to want to remove our tow hook, if you have one, from the factory on your passenger side. It's just going to be 2 bolts here, and a 15mm socket should accomplish that. Now the rear bolt, if you had that tow hook, ours was already threaded, and this is where we're going to have these self-tapping screws. They taper in on the inside. They'll look like this. And we're going to need to make sure that we make threads on the other ones. This one, since it already has those threads there, this should be able to feed in fairly easily. If you do have rust buildup like we have here, I recommend putting some penetrating oil in there, letting it soak. And the same goes for this hole as well, because we'll be making threads. We want to make sure that it's nice and clean as we're making them. And we're going to be doing that on the other side as well. Now you can use this bolt, and the trick really just comes down to make sure it's nice and perpendicular as you tighten down. And take your time. You want to make sure it's straight as you're making those threads. And if you do have a tap at home, you can utilize, this is an M12 by 1 3/4. This is also a good way to do it if you have this available, but if not, you can use these bolts. So I like to kind of just use my hand to start at least to get it to where it'll kind of bite into the metal. You may not be lucky to do that, but if not, what you can do, and you can see it's kind of holding it there, I'm just going to press on my ratchet and slowly turn this in, making sure I keep it nice and perpendicular. We're going to go about halfway. That way we can have threads for our hardware to bolt up our hitch. We're just going to repeat the same process on the other side. And once you make that halfway mark, it should get a little bit easier, and that's when you know that you've created the threads that you need. Now, you're going to pull these bolts back out, so just make sure that once you tap it, you make sure the hardware is not in there. Now that those are tapped out, we're going to grab our carriage bolt, a spacer block, and a fish wire. And to create the next mounting point, it's going to be this hole that's a little bit further back. Take the coiled end, feed it through here, and then towards the frame rail here. We'll take our spacer block, feed that on the coiled end and just kind of in the frame rail. And then we'll just thread our carriage bolt onto the coiled section. And then we'll just pull this through. And we're going to leave our pull wire on. That helps as we're raising our hitch up, not to bump that up in the frame rail. We can hold tension here. So now we'll just repeat the same process on the other side. Now at this point, you may want an extra set of hands or a floor jack to raise this up into place. And just make sure you have a serrated flange nut ready on each side, because we're going to get this bolted up first here just by hand. That way it supports itself. It'll make it easier to get the self-tap screws in. So we'll just feed our pull wire through that rear hole of our hitch. We're going to do that on the other side as well. As we raise it up, if that pull wire doesn't kind of pull through there, pull that slack out. And once you have that stud passed in, we can then use the hitch to kind of wedge against the bolt so it doesn't push up, just like that. We'll take our serrated flange nut, get this one started, and get the other side started as well. With the hitch sported, we'll just take those self-tapping bolts, raise this up, get those holes aligned, and then just start threading these in. We're not going to tighten it down yet. You can see that this is slotted, so once everything's in place, we can kind of fine-tune exactly where that hitch needs to be. Now with all of our hardware in place, we're going to go ahead and snug them down. We're going to be coming back with a torque wrench a little bit, well, actually right after we tighten these down. So we'll get our 15 millimeter on the self-tappers, and then our serrated flange nuts are going to be a 3/4 inch socket. So we'll go ahead and get these all hand tightened down. This is also a good time. I mentioned the slotted holes. Just kind of make sure that your hitch is aligned, whatever method you need to kind of align it, make sure it's good. There's not a ton of play, but you also want to make sure that it's nice and straight before getting everything snugged down. Now we'll just come back with our torque wrench with the same sockets. And keep in mind the torque settings that are found in the instruction manual do change from the two different types of hardware. So just make sure you're adjusting your torque wrench accordingly. And to accomplish these torque settings, you're going to want a 1/2 inch torque wrench. And if you don't have one, you can generally go to an auto parts store and rent one for free. But this is going to be especially important since we have new threads made. We want to make sure it's tight enough to obviously hold the hitch up in place, but also not too tight, causing those threads to become damaged or the hardware to become damaged. Now with all your hardware torqued down properly, you've officially installed your hitch. All that's left to do is load up your accessories, put in your pin and clip, and hit the road. And that was a look and installation of the Etrailer trailer hitch receiver on a 2021 Ford Transit T350.